I'm Gabe Lullo, and welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. We're talking to go-to-market leaders and entrepreneurs who have conquered the challenges, the hustle, and the grind. Get ready for real talk, real insights, and no fluff.
But the hardest thing in the world right now is not actually closing deals, it's actually getting somebody's attention.
If you don't have that hook in that first 5 to 10 seconds, guess what? They're going to scroll to the next one.
You need to go in and you need to make it sound like yourself. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I promise you, we can all tell.
The people that are trolls and the people that are haters never done the thing that you're doing.
I love doing this podcast because I get a front row seat to some of the greatest minds in sales.
Gone are the days of saying stay in your lane. When you're an executive leader and you're an enterprise-wide leader, there are no lanes. You've got to be partners.
Curiosity is like when the type of questions you ask is sometimes the value that you bring.
I need you to tell me when you're ready to buy or what you're ready to do. And I think it's changed so much into like adding more value. And if you're not doing that, then you're definitely going to come off as desperate.
High pressure selling is like a dinosaur tactic at this point.
No parent is like, oh, you should be a salesperson when you grow up, right? Everyone's like a doctor, lawyer, whatever crap. It's never salespeople.
It's not your job to motivate people. It's your job to find motivated people.
It's not cockiness. It's not arrogance. It's confidence knowing I know this and I know that I can help you.
From where I started to where I am today is all because I learned how to sell.
And there's too many people who have only been doing this for 5 freaking minutes. Sit down, close your mouth, actually go out there and get yourself beat up. Then come back and tell me if something is dead or not.
That is exactly why I started this podcast, because right there, that's the epitome of doing hard things.
Welcome back to the Do Hard Things podcast with Lexi and Gabe. Today's guest, Sara, is a 3-time sales leader, outbound system architect, and one of the sharpest minds in SDR development today. She didn't start in sales. In fact, she started as a nurse, learning to listen, assess, and act under pressure. Now, she brings that same clarity and urgency to sales orgs, where she's built outbound engines from zero, led 3 high-performing teams, and helped generate over $10 million in pipeline with systems that actually scale. Sara is known for her sharp playbooks, cold call frameworks, and practical guidance on breaking into and thriving in B2B sales. She's helped generate so many reps go from chaos to confidence, and doing it while raising 2 daughters and chasing Ontario's best waterfalls. Sara, welcome to the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Do Hard Things podcast with your hosts, Gabe and Lexi. We are so excited to have you back and really pumped about this one. Listen, Sara, we just heard your bio here, and we are so excited about your background. You're the definition of doing hard things. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Of course. So I loved hearing the origin story, right? You know, we'd love to hear where you came from, what's your passion, how did you get into this? And yours is pretty interesting, so we'd love to hear more about it. But, you know, you started your career in nursing, right? And so that's a big transition from going from nursing into, you know, building outbound sales engines, right? That's a huge pivot. So what skills or mindset from that first career still show up today in your sales leadership?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And there's a lot of parallels, even though it doesn't seem obvious. Uh, One of my favorite courses when I was in nursing school was called therapeutic communication. We were literally learning like how to communicate effectively and make people feel heard as patients. And we learned all of those skills that we teach in sales, like labeling, mirroring, paraphrasing, like all those sort of like Chris Voss stuff. I didn't even know who Chris Voss was back then until I got into sales. And we were learning it in nursing. And I feel like I lean on that every day, not only in my sales, but also like the way I coach my teams. So that was really valuable. And I think sort of like the second thing is kind of that perspective and that mindset. It's like, I was like a nurse, like dealing with people who were like possibly not going to make it. And so sales is stressful and you have a quota. And yes, it's stressful because it's your livelihood. But when I put in perspective of like running my sales shifts, it just kind of, I get, you know, I'm not as stressed as your average salesperson because I've lived that other kind of stress before.
I love that. And you built outbound from scratch multiple times. And I think that's a part of you doing hard things. Most people avoid starting at zero. What draws you to that part of the journey, the messy middle where nothing exists yet?
Yeah. Love that question. Yeah, I think I'm just like a builder at heart. So coming into a fully built sales system, it's great for a lot of people because you can learn a lot. But for me, it sounds a little boring. So I love when I get to like test and experiment and really feel when something is like working for the first time. And you also kind of get to see like your fingerprints over all of the results instead of just being like one of the cogs in a wheel. So for me, that's just like what keeps my job really exciting.
I love it. I love it. So let's get into this, right? Because systems, scale, outbound, obviously sales development is a big talent pool as well that we have to really understand. So walk me through it. What made you fall in love with coaching SDRs, training SDRs, bringing new SDRs into this world of sales and helping them level up and skill up and get better at what they do?
Yeah, it is my favorite part of like being in this world is coaching SDRs. That's really why I do it in a lot for a lot of reasons. I love it because it's one of those roles that first of all it doesn't require any specific background. Like you don't there's no background, no certification that you need. So like it's really about just eyeing talent and people with grit and people who can do hard things. Speaking of which, and then the other point is like I can make a big impact really early on in somebody's careers. This is typically their first job. And I had somebody who like took a bet on me as a manager and really invested in me and my coaching, and it completely changed my life without being hyperbolic. And if I could be that to someone else, like that's what keeps me motivated.
Let me double down on that because,
Mhm.
you've said there's not, all different backgrounds. And I always say you can't go to school to become a salesperson, right?
Mhm.
And yet here we are. We can all went to school and we're all salespeople. So walk us through that. You said grit, which is, I think, my favorite word in the English language that defines an SDR. You look for that. And it's so hard to find, right? When you're looking at a resume, you're looking at a LinkedIn profile and you're looking for grit. There isn't a line item that says, yes, I have grit. Like you have to figure that out. So
If only.
how do you do that, right? So what do you look for in that interview of sourcing those new SDRs? What do you want also to see and talk me through like what does that interview look like? So what is that value that you see from those SDRs?
Yeah, I think it's the hardest part of being an SDR manager is the hiring because there's no criteria. I think one of the things I look for first of all is just like how you hold up a conversation. So much of the SDR role is building relationships. So it's like in the small talk, like it's even before the interview, it's like, how are you talking to me, relating to me, trying to build a conversation? Less about grit, but more about like the sales, like communication skills. And then when it comes to grit, like I'm trying to find like ask questions about what if they can give me real examples of when they started something from scratch by themselves and what happened, like people who've built something before and maybe even failed but then tried again, like I'm looking for those kind of examples and stories. And often they're not from sales backgrounds. You're talking to people who are like been like hair cutters and salons, or they're bartenders, or they've tried side hustles and things. So those are the kind of people that I feel like really thrive.
Totally agree, and we've seen it here. I've seen cool people come with backgrounds from teaching, police officer, all different things, so really awesome. But little bit of a shift here. You've generated over $10 million in pipeline. But beyond the numbers, what's the most overlooked part of building a repeatable outbound motion?
So most orgs really think about their onboarding pretty well, or like for the most part, but they're not so good about thinking like what's now called like the everboarding. Like, how do you keep coaching that SDR? And the thing I always like to explain to like executives who don't might not understand like why do SDRs need so much coaching? It's like sales is like a performance. It's a sport. You have to perform and show up every single day the same way an athlete does. It might not be physical, but it's with your voice and it's your ability to think on your feet, like improv. They're practicing all the time. So I say like Michael Jordan trained every day and still has he had a coach. So the same goes for SDRs. And so I think the thing that gets lost is like after that onboarding, it just kind of drops off and it's like, here you go, put them in like the water and let them swim. And the problem is often they sink if they're not getting that constant feedback and coaching. So that's where I see it.
I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
So everyone wants cold call scripts, right? Everyone, is really looking at the next AI tool, and AI is really coming in and even threatening the SDR role in itself. But it's interesting, right? Because those are just outputs. What is the input that most teams are missing when they try to scale outbound? And is tools and technology and AI really what it's cracked up to be, or do you feel like it's a blend? Where does your head down around all the tech stack right now?
Yeah, I think it is overwhelming. I definitely don't think it's taking over the SDR role, and like you see that in the market, we're still hiring SDRs, so there is a good reason for that. I think that AI is definitely a helper, but it is not an SDR on its own. And part of that is you have to really think, I call it like niching at scale. So you can't just like automate everything and expect to get results. It starts with like being really precise about who you're targeting and why you're targeting them and trying to go like a level deeper than all of these tools. So a lot of them will be like, here's a list of like people who raised funding or people who are hiring, but it's like what's in that job description that you can find that it can actually signal some kind of urgency or some kind of relevance to the problem that you solve, and then aligning your problem story to that trigger and to that specific ICP. And when I say ICP, I'm not saying VP sales. We're talking about a VP sales who just inherited a remote team and missed his target. So we really need to go in order to stand out today. It's about really niching down. So you can build a list of like 50 of those kinds of VP sales, but you couldn't build a list of 1,000.
Awesome. Well, let's talk systems here. What's one playbook or process you've built that you're particularly proud of, and why do you think it worked?
Yeah, so I think it's all of this. Like, there's a lot of talk right now about like signal led plays and intent, and like how do you put that all together. So I think it's a combination of having a signal led outbound motion and still keeping like the old school account based approach. And so I did that at my last organization. And what I was really proud of was kind of just what I spoke about. So we worked really hard at not just like making a big campaign of congrats on your Series B funding, but actually going back and finding like where are they going to use that funding and does it relate to the problem that we solved. So we were able to really scale our outbound by sort of what I talk about, this niche at scale approach, and creating that signal led outbound.
I love it. So you're doing hard things. You said it a bunch of times. What we do is hard. I always kind of talk about, right? Doing hard things is typically reserved mentally for physical labor or doing things where you have to like, get hurt or like getting hurt on the job. But, we sit in chairs and air conditioning, and we're usually in our homes on Zoom calls, on phones. Is it really that hard? Like, what are your thoughts on that? And how do you coach, SDRs when it comes to, looking at the brighter side of things and getting promoted versus that uncomfortable truth that, sales is hard. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. So I think it's all perspective. So I think in terms of working in a tech company and working in an air conditioned environment, as you say, sales is hard because we have our commissions, so we're not like getting the full salary that maybe some of our counterparts in the organization have. So we have that pressure. We also have the pressure that like if you don't perform, unlike maybe some other departments, it's like you might get X next month because you didn't hit your revenue target. So it is hard. I don't want to take away from that. But I think that perspective that you just brought and sort of what I talked about in nursing, I think bringing that and talking about it, like we talk about it all the time when we're stressed. It's like I'm not outside building the roads in the sun, and I'm not, and some of these people come from these jobs, so they know it. And so I think just, yeah, always talking about the perspective of where we are is important.
Right. So okay, there's a lot of sales leaders, right, in our audience.
Yeah.
Go take us through, something that maybe to prepare them. There's also a lot of SDRs and AEs in our audience that are going to be sales leaders one day soon, looking to be as soon as possible, learning from you. So what is something that most sales leaders or leadership roles that you've actually been in, that's uncomfortable, that maybe someone doesn't realize it until they're in it, that we can tell them?
Yeah, this is my favorite because I lived this and I made this mistake. I wanted to be the leader that was like friendly and everybody loved, and like that was like I'm like I want everyone to just like me. And yeah, that doesn't turn out so well all the time. What actually ended up happening is like you avoid having like bad hard conversations, you let like small things that bother the team just go, and it just ends up really snowballing and hurting the whole team. So one of the biggest lessons I learned was that like you kind of have to have this capacity to not always be liked. And so that means sometimes like telling a rep who's high performing that he might not be meeting up to the team's values and, misbehaving in some way and kind of addressing that. And so, yeah, being liked feels good in the short term, but it doesn't pan out in the long term. I think that's like the biggest lesson.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think the best approach to building trust in new leadership role is off the bat? I mean, you've led 3 teams all with different culture goals, challenges. What was your approach there?
Yeah, I think it's like I'll say keep it particularly to sales and to the SDR team. It's really about getting in the weeds with SDRs. I think there's nothing an SDR hates more than being told like how to do cold calls when they've never heard you do a cold call and never seen you do it. So I really like I always have my own target account list. I'm doing it with them. We're doing cold call blitzes together. They hear my calls. I kind of like when I was an SDR, I always like had this thing in my head that I'm not going to take cold call feedback from somebody who hasn't been on a cold call, let's say in the last quarter. So I wouldn't expect that from my SDRs either. And then I think the second piece is kind of related to the previous question is just like holding standards across the team. So no matter what somebody's performance level is, like holding everyone accountable to the values and the way that we behave on the team and not letting that slide and sort of like poison the team culture.
That's awesome. So a
Yeah.
lot of the SDRs really early on in their career, they struggle with confidence. And this is, I think, is the biggest thing that we train here at our company. I have a line that I say all the time. I said, listen, borrow our confidence or borrow my confidence until you had your own. I mean,
I
I
like
know,
that.
like you said before, you're coming from nursing. I was a bartender before I was an SDR, right?
Nice.
And so that we have teachers, to Lexi's point earlier, we have police officers, we have all these different walks of life, and we love that. And it's like this melting pot of past professions that get in this role. And then we're calling executives, we're calling VPs, we're calling C-suite individuals, and we're trying to impress them enough to say yes. And that in itself it's very challenging. And you're talking to very highly confident, highly successful, typically A-type personality prospects. So how do we, get them ingrained, or how do we like, essentially like train their mindset to have this ultra confidence that's required to do the job?
Yeah, I love that question. I like borrow borrow my confidence, kind of like fake it till you make it. I think with me, I'm always like thinking about like sort of like the Simon Sinek thing of like start with why. It's like why are you here
Right.
and why were you chosen and why did you choose this? And we kind of go through that whole exercise together. And I think with when they remember that like they were chosen for this job out of a pool of people because we saw a set of skills in them. And we saw, what they had to offer, it kind of gives them that confidence boost of like, oh yeah, I do belong here. I do belong to like talk to executives, even though I was a bartender a year ago. So I think just that's a really big one. And then the other thing that I always talk about is like, and it's kind of like I keep referencing all my favorite people, Josh Braun, detaching from the outcome. So like a lot of reps will like literally attach their like self-worth to whether a call went well or not. And it's like, let's just detach from that. Let's just like, we're just having conversations. We're building our skills. We're learning for, our future roles. And I think that's like a big one to kind of help, build the
Well,
confidence.
let me double down on this because
Yeah.
you've been quoting book,
Yeah.
Simon said, all these people.
Yeah.
You in your own right have been learning from these people because you're curious and because you wanted to gain knowledge, right?
Mhm.
Like I talked about before, you went to school for nursing and yet you get into sales. And what's interesting about sales and what I realize is that there's more education available in sales than any other industry, whether it comes to
Mhm.
books, personal development, conferences, webinars, podcasts, but people don't train or, universities don't teach it at school.
Mhm.
But you did all that on your own. So where do you look at when it comes to confidence and maybe education at the same time? Because when I looked at it as like, I get confident when I learn from Simon Sinek or when I learn from Jim Rohn or Darren Hardy or all these amazing authors, they give me that confidence to know one, I'm not by myself. This is hard. And secondly, this is exactly how you communicate effectively. And they give you the manual. Do you do that when it comes to your sales teams about giving them at least assets to do self-education, and do you find that to be important?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just came off of last week doing a 2-day cold calling workshop for 2 days, and I just pulled in, all the free resources I can get online, because I want them also to hear from other people, not just like this is my way of doing cold calling. It's like these are what a lot of other experts are doing, and there's a lot of different ways that might sit with you. So I want them to feel like empowered to go find, the people that they align with and that they learn from. But I think for me, like all this like learning is also I see it in a different light. It's about taking control over your growth in your career. So it's not like I want them to not feel like I need to go tell them to go read a book in order to read a book. It's like they should be empowered to go take control of their growth in their life. And I think that's the other part of it.
Totally. And going off that, you've talked about staying in the SDR role long enough to really learn. How do you help reps balance ambition with patience?
It's really hard in the SDR role because they usually come in just waiting to be promoted to AE as fast as possible. And sometimes it is possible, but a lot of the times it's not. So I think it's just, first of all, setting expectations from the beginning, but also like, just like a sale, it's like, what's in it for them to stay in this role for a little bit longer? So what are you going to learn? And so framing it in a way that the SDR, like I always say, like the SDR role is like a free MBA. You get to learn sales, you're talking to marketing, you're talking to product. So it really gives you like, if this is your first job, you literally get to understand how business works. And so staying here is only going to help build your skills for your future. And just like not framing it away as I'm just waiting for my promotion to get out of the SDR role.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about content. Your content is authentic, it's real, and you're posting it as an SDR, life, now SDR manager and leader. Is there room for SDRs to be building content right now? Is that like a requirement? Is that what you're thinking? And also, how do you stay so grounded when it comes to your content?
Yeah, love those questions. Is it a requirement? I've struggled with that question because like your LinkedIn is your own property, so I can't say you must be posting unless that's like part of our contract maybe. But I do think it definitely gives you a lot of credibility, it opens up a lot of doors, it brings in opportunities, especially if you're posting about something your ICP cares about. But I think it's really industry specific. Like I worked for construction industry for a while, and if I was posting on LinkedIn, I don't know if might help me in my SDR role, but definitely not getting to construction people because they're too busy actually doing hard work outside. But I think you have to know your industry. Right now, I work with HR tech. They're very much on LinkedIn. So if I'm not posting, my competitor is. So I think that's important. In terms of how I'm keeping my posting authentic. I actually don't have a content plan. I know that's like not best practice, and most people do who are posting regularly. But I just find literally like every day something happens where I'm like, ooh, I should write about this. So I just let life happen, and that gives me enough inspiration to go.
That's awesome. And it really makes your content really individualized and people can tell that it's authentic. So it's awesome. For someone wanting to build a reputation as a sales coach or leader, what's one thing you'd tell them to stop doing and one thing that they should start?
Yeah. So it's kind of like two sides of the same coin. So I find a lot of sales leaders are giving like there's very like general feedback about sales and how sales can be done, but I think at the end of the day, sales is between like two humans, so it has to be really specific to that person, to that industry, to that situation. So I think we need to be really specific, like stop giving generic feedback and giving more specific feedback as we coach. And the other part of that is sort of what I was talking before about really telling the truth directly and like not always being liked. I think like my best coaching moments were when it was uncomfortable. And I had to give a piece of direct feedback that was maybe not the best, but almost every time I'll get like a few days later a thank you note saying, you know what, thank you so much for telling me that. No one ever told me that. And like, thank God you didn't sugarcoat it because now, I booked another call or whatever it is. So I think that's really important.
I love it. Awesome.
Mhm.
So Sarah, in closing, here's my question for you. You've helped a ton of SDRs come into this space for the first time. You've helped them break records. So there's a ton of SDRs that follow us in our audience. So what's one thing when you're advising these reps that really it's a belief or behavior that sets them apart and really puts them on that track to be ultra successful?
Yeah. And we touched on this before. It really is feeling like they have a very strong, like what's called like internal locus of control. They're never like, oh, the leads are bad or the product is bad or marketing is not doing their job. They're like, I have control over my outcomes no matter what. So they really take they really see it as their own business and that they have the power within them to change the outcomes. So whether that's reaching out for more feedback or more resources or going and finding it online or whatever it is, like nothing's going to stop them, and they really believe that they are in control of their own outcomes. So I think that's the big differentiator.
Sarah, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. Really excited to get this live. Who is the best person that should reach out to you and where should they do so?
So anybody who's trying to break into SDR, the SDR role, or they're trying to thrive and meet their quota, I'm always happy to talk shop. Just message me on LinkedIn, Sara Hanegby.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. We appreciate you. And to our audience members, thanks so much for tuning in. Keep doing hard things, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.